Smiling face with smiling eyes, don't look there. But the rancher kept looking and did something that infuriated everyone. The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide, open fields of Arizona, painting the sky with soft oranges and pinks. On the old McCall ranch, everything looked peaceful. The cattle grazed quietly, the horses shifted lazily in the pens, and the wind whispered through the tall grass. But for Henry McCall, the morning felt different. There was a strange restlessness in him that he could not ignore. He had spent almost all of his life on this land, yet he felt there was still something he did not know, some secret the ranch was holding. Henry was a man who lived simply, but he was also deeply curious. He had grown up listening to stories from his grandfather about the land, about the hidden canyons, and the people who had lived there long before the ranch existed. Those stories were full of mystery, and they had always fascinated Henry. He remembered the old man saying, "Some places are better left alone, son, but a curious heart will find them anyway." Henry had always taken that to heart, and now, decades later, his curiosity was stronger than ever. The people in the small town near the ranch were familiar with Henry. They knew him as a hardworking, stubborn man who could fix anything and handle any problem that came up on the ranch. But they also knew that when Henry set his mind to something, there was almost no stopping him. And lately, he had been thinking about a part of his land that no one ever went near. A canyon hidden behind thick mesquite trees and a tangle of sagebrush. It was a place people whispered about but rarely mentioned directly. "Don't go there, Henry," the neighbors had said when he asked about it. "Nothing good comes from looking there, just leave it be." But Henry could not leave it alone. He felt an urge, almost like a pull from the land itself. It called to him, telling him that something important was hidden, something worth seeing. He tried to ignore it at first. He told himself he was too busy with the ranch work, that the cattle needed feeding and the fences needed fixing. But every day, his mind returned to that hidden canyon. One morning, after feeding the cattle and checking on the fences, Henry decided he could wait no longer. He mounted his horse, a strong brown mare named Daisy, and rode toward the back of his property. The ride was not easy. The path was rough and overgrown, full of thorny bushes and uneven ground. But Henry moved carefully, knowing that each step could reveal something new. He was alert, watching for anything unusual, a footprint, a piece of wood, or even a glimpse of water. As he approached the thicket that hid the canyon, he slowed his horse. The trees grew thicker here, and the sunlight barely reached the ground. Henry dismounted and tied Daisy to a sturdy branch. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The air smelled different here, fresher somehow, mixed with the scent of dry earth and wildflowers. He moved slowly, pushing branches aside, feeling the brush against his arms, listening to the quiet sounds of the hidden land. Soon, he reached a small clearing. The ground was uneven, and he could see the edges of the canyon stretching downwards, shaded and secret. Henry's heart began to beat faster. This was it, the place everyone had warned him about. Yet instead of fear, he felt excitement. His eyes scanned the area carefully. He noticed footprints in the soft dirt, as if someone had passed this way recently. There were small stones arranged in a circle and the remains of what looked like an old campfire, long cold and covered in ash. Henry knelt down to examine the footprints. They were small, delicate, almost like a child's. His mind raced. Who had been here? Why had they come? And why had this place been left alone for so long? Questions piled up, each one more puzzling than the last. He could feel the history in the ground beneath him, in the stones, in the plants that grew untouched by cattle or humans. There was a story here, and he had stumbled right into it. For the next hour, Henry explored carefully. He did not rush. He took small steps, making sure not to disturb anything. His eyes caught the colors of wildflowers he had never seen before. Vibrant reds, purples, and yellows growing among the rocks. There were tiny insects crawling over petals, birds singing in the trees, and a small stream gurgling quietly at the bottom of the canyon. The sight was breathtaking. He realized that this hidden place had been protected naturally, almost as if the land itself did not want anyone to disturb it. Yet despite the beauty, Henry knew that curiosity was dangerous. He remembered the warnings from neighbors and friends. "Don't look there," they had said. But now that he had looked, he felt a mix of awe and responsibility. He knew he could not keep this place a secret forever. Something told him that it was important not just for him, but for everyone who cared about the land and its history. As he continued exploring, Henry noticed traces of human activity. There were carved symbols on the rocks, faint and worn with age, but still visible to someone who looked closely. It seemed like a small group of people had once lived here, leaving behind signs of their presence. Henry felt a chill run down his spine. He was not the first person to be drawn to this hidden place, and perhaps he was not the last. By the time the sun was high in the sky, Henry had mapped out much of the canyon in his mind. He mounted Daisy again and rode back to the main ranch, but his thoughts stayed in the hidden canyon. Every moment, he replayed what he had seen: the flowers, the footprints, the symbols, the stream. He knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger discovery. When he returned home, Henry found his neighbor, Mr. Lawson, working near the fence. "So, did you listen to us?" Mr. Lawson asked with a raised eyebrow. "Did you stay away from that place?" Henry smiled a little sheepishly, but there was determination in his eyes. "I went there," he said simply, "and I saw something incredible." Mr. Lawson shook his head. "I warned you. You know how people get when they find out someone has been in that canyon. Some of the town folks might get angry." "I know," Henry replied. "But it's too special to ignore. I have to understand it." Word began to spread slowly. Henry was careful at first, telling only a few trusted neighbors about what he had found. Most were curious but cautious. Some warned him again to leave it alone, worried that any interference could damage the delicate ecosystem. Others were fascinated and wanted to see the canyon for themselves. Henry listened to all opinions but remained steadfast. He knew that discovering something hidden was exciting, but it also carried responsibility. The land was fragile, and he did not want to cause harm. He started making notes, drawing sketches, and recording everything he could remember. Every small detail seemed important: the patterns of flowers, the layout of the rocks, even the sounds he heard in the quiet moments. As days turned into weeks, Henry's curiosity only grew stronger. Each morning, he returned to the canyon, taking different paths and looking for things he might have missed. Sometimes he would spend hours just observing, marveling at how untouched and beautiful the area was. Other times, he carefully marked the spots of interest so he could study them later. He became a careful guardian of the hidden canyon, learning its secrets while protecting it from harm. Through it all, Henry realized that the warnings he had received were not meant to scare him, but to make him think carefully about his actions. "Don't look there" was more than advice, it was a challenge, and Henry had accepted it not recklessly but thoughtfully. He understood that his curiosity could be both a gift and a risk. By the end of the first part of his journey, Henry had discovered not just a hidden canyon, but also a new side of himself. He realized that life was full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and that sometimes the courage to look where others had warned you not to could lead to the most remarkable experiences. Henry knew that more challenges lay ahead. The town, the neighbors, and even strangers might not understand his fascination, but he was ready to face their skepticism. For him, the hidden canyon was not just a place. It was a story, a secret treasure, and a new chapter in his life on the ranch. And so, with the sun setting over the fields, Henry McCall sat by the fence, looking toward the hidden canyon in the distance. He felt a mixture of excitement and responsibility, knowing that his life had changed that day, and that the land still had many secrets left to reveal. Henry McCall could hardly concentrate on his daily ranch work. The hidden canyon had taken over his thoughts completely. Every moment away from it felt dull, as if the rest of the world had become ordinary while that secret place held extraordinary beauty. He would check the fences, feed the cattle, and repair broken equipment, but his mind kept wandering back to the thicket and the clearing he had discovered. He began keeping a small notebook, sketching the flowers, the rocks, and even the arrangement of the old campfire stones. Every detail seemed important, and he wanted to remember everything exactly as it was. One afternoon, as he walked toward the barn, his neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, approached him. She was a kind woman, but she had a sharp eye and was always observant. "Henry," she said quietly, glancing around, "I've heard some people talking. They say you've been spending too much time at that canyon. You know, the one everyone says to avoid." Henry smiled politely. "Yes, I've been there. It's remarkable." Mrs. Thompson raised her eyebrows. "Remarkable or not, Henry, people are nervous. They say you're stirring up trouble. They worry that if too many people find out about it, it could cause problems for the ranch and for the land itself." Henry nodded, understanding her concern. "I know, and I'm careful." I don't want to disturb anything. I want to study it a little, that's all." Despite his assurances, word began to spread. By the following week, more neighbors had heard of Henry's discovery. Some came out of curiosity, asking questions cautiously. Others were angry, warning him that he should leave the canyon alone. A few were supportive, eager to see the hidden wonders for themselves. Henry found himself in a difficult position. He wanted to protect the canyon, but he also wanted to share what he had found. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that he could not keep the secret forever. And yet, he also knew that revealing it carelessly could bring disaster. Visitors might trample the rare flowers, damage the old stones, or scare away the birds and small animals that lived there. One morning, Henry decided to take a small step. He invited two trusted neighbors, Mr. Lawson and Mrs. Thompson, to visit the canyon with him. "I want you to see it for yourself," he said, "not just to believe me, but to understand why I feel this place is so special." They agreed, though reluctantly. The three of them rode together, following the rough path Henry had marked before. The closer they got, the quieter the town seemed to feel. Even the wind seemed different here, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. When they reached the clearing, both Mr. Lawson and Mrs. Thompson paused in amazement. It was even more beautiful than Henry had described. The flowers were in full bloom, a mix of colors he could barely name. The sunlight fell softly through the trees, illuminating the rocks and casting shadows that made the canyon feel like a hidden palace. The stream at the bottom gurgled gently, clear and cool. Birds flitted through the branches, singing songs that seemed almost too perfect for the quiet desert. "Henry, this is incredible," Mrs. Thompson whispered. Mr. Lawson nodded slowly. "It really is, but I worry. If people find out this could be ruined in a single afternoon, some folks wouldn't think twice about trampling the flowers or leaving trash behind." Henry had anticipated their concerns. "That's why I've kept it private," he said. "I wanted to be sure I understood it before anyone else came. I'm not showing it off. I just think it's important that we know what's here, that we appreciate it, and that we protect it." Despite his careful explanation, Henry could feel a tension building. Even his friends were beginning to doubt him. Their faces showed worry, suspicion, and a little fear of what might happen if more people learned about the canyon. But Henry also noticed a spark of curiosity in their eyes, the same spark he had felt when he first discovered the place. Over the next few days, Henry visited the canyon regularly, often alone. He began documenting everything more carefully. He measured the flowers, noted their colors, and recorded the locations of each cluster. He observed the old fire pit stones, the footprints, and even the carvings on the rocks. Each detail seemed to tell a story, a history that belonged to someone long gone. But the more Henry explored, the more complicated the situation became. Some neighbors had begun whispering again. "He's been going there too often," they said. "He's stirring things up." Others complained more directly. "You shouldn't disturb it, Henry. Leave it alone." Henry understood their anger. He did not take it personally, but he could not ignore it either. The canyon called to him, and he felt a responsibility to protect it, study it, and understand it. His actions were not meant to offend anyone, but he knew that people were judging him harshly. One evening, as the sun began to set, Henry sat on a large rock at the edge of the canyon, thinking about the situation. The world was changing, and he realized that curiosity could be dangerous as well as rewarding. If he was not careful, his desire to explore could upset the community and even damage the very place he wanted to protect. Still, he could not turn back. The canyon was more than just a hidden spot on his ranch. It was alive. Every plant, every stone, every sound seemed to tell him something new. Henry felt a connection to the land that went beyond simple ownership. He knew he had stumbled onto something important, something rare, and he could not ignore it. Over the next weeks, Henry's work continued. He made careful notes about everything he observed. He even began taking small photographs to record details that sketches alone could not capture. Every visit brought new discoveries: a hidden patch of flowers, a cluster of animal tracks, or a small hollow in the rock that seemed to have been used as a shelter. Each finding added to the story the land was telling him, yet the reactions from the town became harder to ignore. Some neighbors began visiting the ranch, asking Henry questions that seemed polite but were laced with suspicion. Others stopped speaking to him altogether, fearing that his actions would bring unwanted attention to the area. Even friends who had been supportive at first seemed distant. Henry tried not to let it affect him, but he could feel the tension building. The canyon had become a source of conflict as well as fascination. He understood that people were worried about trespassers, damage, and the disruption of the natural balance. They were afraid that the hidden beauty of the canyon could be destroyed if it became widely known. Henry reflected on all this one afternoon while sitting by the stream at the bottom of the canyon. He watched the water flow over the smooth stones, listened to the birds singing, and breathed in the scent of the wildflowers. In that quiet moment, he realized that he had a choice. He could either keep the canyon a secret, protecting it at the risk of isolation, or he could find a way to share its beauty carefully, ensuring that it was appreciated and respected. The thought stayed with him as he returned to the ranch each evening. He began planning how he might introduce the canyon to the world without causing harm. He considered creating small signs to educate visitors, marking trails to prevent damage, and working with neighbors to ensure that everyone understood the importance of respecting the land. But Henry also knew that any action he took could anger people. Some would never forgive him for revealing the canyon, even if he did it responsibly. Others would see him as reckless or selfish, and yet he could not ignore the pull of the hidden place. It had changed him. It had awakened a sense of wonder and responsibility he had never felt before. As days turned into weeks, Henry's plan began to take shape. He would continue to explore and document, but he would also reach out to a few trusted individuals to help him protect the canyon. Slowly, he hoped, they could convince the community that this hidden treasure was worth preserving. The hidden canyon, once a secret that Henry had stumbled upon, was now at the center of his thoughts every day. It was more than just a place. It was a challenge, a responsibility, and a source of discovery. And Henry knew that the choices he made in the coming weeks could determine not only the fate of the canyon, but also the way his neighbors and friends viewed him. Henry's curiosity, which had led him to this secret spot, was now shaping his life in ways he had never imagined. He was learning that discovery often comes with conflict, and that protecting what you love sometimes requires patience, careful planning, and the courage to face criticism. And so, as the sun set over the ranch and the canyon lay hidden in its quiet beauty, Henry McCall continued his work. He was determined to understand, preserve, and respect the hidden place he had found. Every flower, every stone, and every sound reminded him that some treasures are fragile, and some responsibilities are heavy. But Henry was ready to face them all, because he knew that some secrets were too important to ignore. Henry McCall had been visiting the hidden canyon almost every day now. The place had grown more than just a curiosity to him, it had become a part of his life. Every rock, every flower, every bird seemed to tell him something new. He had grown attached to the quiet, untouched beauty of the canyon, and he felt a responsibility to care for it. But along with the fascination came a new challenge. The people in his town were beginning to notice, and not all of them were happy. It started slowly. A few neighbors had seen him heading toward the canyon more often than usual. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Henry's up to something again," some said. "He can't just leave things alone." Others were more concerned about the land itself. What if he disturbs it? That canyon is delicate. People shouldn't be messing with it. Henry tried to ignore the gossip, but he could feel tension building. One morning, he returned to the canyon to find that the small trail he had cleared for his own use had been trampled, not by him, but by curious animals or perhaps someone who had wandered in. A small patch of flowers had been crushed. Henry's heart sank. He had been careful, trying to protect the canyon, but it seemed the world outside was beginning to encroach. That evening, he sat on a large rock at the edge of the canyon and thought about what he could do. He realized that the only way to protect the place was to make it clear to people that it was special and fragile. But even as he considered this, he worried about how the town would react. The people here were proud, hard-working, and protective of their own land. They would not take kindly to someone making changes or drawing attention to a private area, even if it was for the right reasons. Despite the warnings in his mind, Henry made a bold decision. He wanted to share the canyon in a way that would preserve it. He began planning a small platform, something simple, where people could stand and view the canyon without stepping on the flowers or disturbing the ground. He also planned to place signs explaining the importance of the plants, the history of the area, and the need to respect the land. To Henry, it seemed the perfect compromise. People could learn and appreciate the canyon while keeping it safe. The next morning, Henry gathered some materials from the ranch: wood planks, nails, and paint. He worked quietly and carefully, choosing a location where the platform would have minimal impact on the environment. He measured, hammered, and painted, all while thinking about the reactions of the townspeople. He knew it would not be easy, but he felt that if he did nothing, the canyon might be lost to neglect or careless visitors. By the time he finished, the platform stood at the edge of the canyon, simple but sturdy. A small wooden sign hung from it, freshly painted: "The hidden canyon, please respect this natural treasure." Henry stepped back and looked at his work, pride mixed with anxiety. He had done what he thought was right, but he had no idea how the town would respond. The following day, a few neighbors came by. Some had been curious for weeks, and they were eager to see the canyon. Henry guided them carefully along the path and explained the platform and signs. At first, they seemed impressed by the beauty of the canyon. The flowers, the rocks, the birds, and the gentle stream were all captivating, but then expressions changed. Some faces tightened. Whispers began. "What is he doing?" one neighbor muttered under their breath. "Who does he think he is?" Others were more direct. "Henry, this is not your land to display. You can't just build things without asking anyone," said Mr. Lawson, a neighbor who had once been supportive. Henry listened patiently. "I understand your concern," he said. "I didn't want to disturb anything. I just thought that by building the platform, we could protect the canyon while letting people appreciate it." But the words did little to calm the growing anger. Some neighbors felt that Henry had overstepped. They argued that by making the canyon visible, he was inviting trouble. People from outside the town might come, tourists might trample the flowers, and the fragile ecosystem could be destroyed. Others were angry simply because Henry had acted without consulting the community first. Despite the criticism, Henry remained calm. He had always believed that action was better than hesitation when it came to something important. The canyon was special, and he could not leave it to be damaged by ignorance or neglect. He explained once more, showing the sketches and notes he had made, pointing out how carefully he had worked to avoid harming the area. But even as he spoke, Henry realized that he could not convince everyone. Some people were too angry or too suspicious to see his intentions. They argued that the land belonged to the McCall Ranch, yes, but it was part of a larger community, and Henry should have been more thoughtful. Their anger was palpable, and Henry felt the weight of it pressing down on him. Still, he did not back down. Over the next several days, Henry continued to visit the canyon, maintaining the platform and checking on the flowers. He noticed the small patches that had been damaged had begun to recover, slowly but surely. He took careful notes on the growth of the plants and the activity of the animals, documenting every detail. He even began sketching the patterns of the flowers and the way the sunlight moved across the canyon throughout the day. One afternoon, a larger group of neighbors came to confront him. Their faces were stern, and their voices carried frustration and worry. "Henry, you can't keep doing this," one shouted. "You're making enemies and causing trouble. People are upset, and for good reason." Henry remained calm, listening to their complaints. "I understand," he said. "I know it seems sudden and bold, but I am only trying to protect the canyon. If we leave it alone without guidance, it could be ruined." Arguments continued for hours. Some people shouted, others gestured angrily, and a few simply walked away in frustration. Henry could feel the anger, but he also felt a strange satisfaction. For the first time, he realized that standing up for something you care about could be difficult. But the canyon was worth it. He knew that, no matter how angry people became, he could not ignore the responsibility he had taken on. As the weeks went by, the tension grew. The town was divided. Some people began to see Henry's point. They appreciated his efforts to protect the canyon and understood the care he had taken. Others continued to fume, believing he had acted recklessly and without consideration for the community. Henry focused on what he could control. He continued to document, sketch, and photograph the canyon. He repaired the platform when it began to show signs of wear. He cleaned the paths and even placed small markers to keep people from stepping on the delicate plants. Every day, he reminded himself why he had started this project. Yet, no matter how careful he was, he could feel the growing tension in the town. Whispers turned into discussions, discussions turned into arguments, and arguments began to reach the ears of people beyond the immediate neighbors. Henry's actions had sparked a debate about responsibility, curiosity, and the proper way to protect the land. Through it all, Henry remained determined. He understood that discovery often came with conflict. The canyon was more than a hidden place. It was a responsibility, a challenge, and a treasure. And he had accepted that challenge, knowing that he might face anger, misunderstanding, and even hostility from the community. One evening, after a long day at the canyon, Henry sat on the platform, looking down at the wildflowers and the gentle stream below. The sun cast a golden light across the rocks and the birds sang softly. Despite the conflict, he felt a sense of peace. He had acted with care, with thought, and with respect for the land. That was all he could do. And so, as the night fell over the McCall Ranch and the hidden canyon lay in quiet beauty, Henry knew that the coming days would be difficult. He would face anger, criticism, and perhaps even opposition from the town. But he also knew that he had done the right thing. The canyon was safe, beautiful, and alive, and he would protect it, no matter the cost. In the quiet moments before sleep, Henry reflected on everything that had happened. He realized that curiosity, responsibility, and courage were intertwined. Looking where others warned him not to had brought conflict, but it had also brought discovery, knowledge, and a deeper connection to the land he loved. Henry McCall had changed. He was no longer just a rancher caring for cattle and fences. He was a guardian of a hidden treasure, someone willing to face anger and misunderstanding for the sake of something greater than himself. And though the community might never fully understand his choices, he knew he had followed his heart, and for Henry, that was enough. Henry McCall knew that the tension in the town would not disappear overnight. The hidden canyon had sparked strong emotions among his neighbors. Some were impressed by his dedication, while others remained angry at what they saw as his reckless actions. Despite the criticism, Henry continued to care for the canyon every day. He repaired the platform, cleared paths carefully, and ensured that the flowers and wildlife were not disturbed. Every morning, as the sun rose over the ranch, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever. One day, a small group of neighbors approached him cautiously. They were a mix of people, some who had been skeptical and others who were curious about the canyon. "Henry," said Mr. Lawson, speaking carefully, "we've been thinking. Maybe there's a way to protect the canyon without causing conflict. Can we help?" Henry felt a surge of hope. "Yes," he said. "If we work together, we can make sure this place is safe and preserved, but we need to do it carefully, step by step." They started small. Henry and the group marked safe trails with small, natural-looking stones. They placed gentle signs to guide visitors to the platform, explaining how to observe without damaging the flowers or wildlife. Henry also encouraged the neighbors to watch the plants and animals so they could see firsthand how delicate and special the canyon was. Slowly, the community began to understand that Henry's intentions were genuine. Still, it was not easy. Some people remained doubtful, questioning every decision. "What if outsiders come and ruin it?" one woman asked. Another neighbor worried, even with signs, people might ignore the rules. Henry listened patiently. He knew these concerns were valid. Protecting a special place required constant attention and cooperation. Over the next few weeks, Henry and the volunteers worked tirelessly. They repaired sections of the trail that had been worn down by rain, trimmed branches that blocked the path, and built small, low barriers to keep visitors from stepping on fragile plants. They also held small gatherings to explain the canyon's importance, teaching children and adults alike about respecting nature and preserving history. Slowly, the attitude of the town began to change. People who had once been angry at Henry now saw the positive results of his careful work. They realized that his stubbornness had not been reckless. It had been driven by care, curiosity, and respect for the land. The canyon, once a source of conflict, was now a point of pride for the community. One morning, Henry noticed something remarkable. A group of children from the town had quietly followed him to the canyon. They sat on the platform he had built, pointing out the flowers, the rocks, and the birds they saw. Their eyes were wide with wonder. "This is amazing," one of them whispered. "I never knew something so beautiful was right here." Henry smiled, his heart swelling with pride. He realized that sharing the canyon in a careful, responsible way had brought the community closer. People were learning to appreciate the land, to respect its history, and to value its natural beauty. and in doing so, they had come to understand Henry's point of view. But even as things improved, Henry knew that protecting the canyon would be an ongoing task. Nature was fragile, and human curiosity could be unpredictable. He decided to create a system of volunteer caretakers, neighbors who could help monitor the canyon, maintain the trails, and ensure that visitors followed the rules. By involving the community directly, Henry hoped to strengthen the sense of shared responsibility. The plan worked better than he expected. Volunteers began to take pride in the canyon, watching over it as if it were part of their own homes. They taught younger generations to respect the plants and animals, and slowly, the hidden canyon became a symbol of cooperation and care. Even those who had once been skeptical now walked the trails with admiration, seeing firsthand the positive impact of Henry's careful guidance. One afternoon, Henry sat on the platform, watching the sunlight play across the rocks and the flowers. The air was filled with the gentle sounds of nature, the stream bubbling, birds singing, and leaves rustling in the breeze. He reflected on everything that had happened, the initial discovery, the criticism, the anger, and finally, the compromise. Henry realized that curiosity could be both powerful and challenging. Looking where others warned him not to had caused conflict, but it had also brought knowledge, beauty, and connection. He understood that discovery was rarely simple. It often came with responsibility, requiring patience, care, and sometimes the courage to stand firm despite criticism. As he watched a young couple guide their children along the safe paths, Henry felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The hidden canyon was no longer just a secret. It had become a shared treasure, a place where people could learn, explore, and appreciate the delicate balance of nature. And it had done so without being harmed, thanks to careful planning and the cooperation of the community. Henry thought back to the warnings he had received at the beginning. "Don't look there," people had said. At the time, he had been drawn to the canyon by curiosity and a sense of adventure. Now, he realized that the warnings had been lessons in patience and responsibility. Looking where he was told not to had been only the first step. Protecting what he discovered was the real challenge, and the reward had been far greater than he had imagined. Months passed, and the canyon continued to thrive. Flowers bloomed, animals roamed freely, and the stream flowed gently through the rocks. Henry continued his daily visits, ensuring that everything remained in balance, but he no longer felt alone. The community had come together, working as a team to protect the hidden beauty of the land. Even the skeptics had softened. They saw how the canyon had brought people together, how it had taught lessons of care and respect, and how it had inspired children to appreciate the wonders of the natural world. Henry's actions, which had once infuriated many, had ultimately united the town around a shared love for the land. Henry also found personal growth through the experience. He had learned to listen more carefully, to consider the perspectives of others, and to find ways to balance curiosity with responsibility. He had discovered that leading by example, rather than by argument, could bring more lasting change. And he had realized that some secrets once discovered could become treasures for everyone if handled with care and respect. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, Henry stood on the platform and looked out over the canyon. The sky was painted with deep oranges, pinks, and purples, reflecting off the rocks and the stream below. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that he had not only discovered something rare, but had also ensured its preservation. He thought of the children who would come to the canyon in the future, the neighbors who had learned to work together, and the visitors who would appreciate the beauty without causing harm. Henry understood that the canyon was no longer just his discovery. It was a shared responsibility, a lesson in curiosity, care, and cooperation. Henry's journey had been long and difficult. He had faced criticism, anger, and doubt. But in the end, his actions had brought something greater than himself to life. The hidden canyon, once a secret he had stumbled upon, had become a symbol of community, respect for nature, and the rewards of careful curiosity. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Henry walked back to his ranch house, tired but content. He knew that the work was not finished. Nature always demanded attention, but he also knew that he had made the right choices. The canyon would thrive, protected by those who loved it, and it would continue to inspire wonder for generations to come. Henry McCall had learned an important lesson. Some discoveries are not just about finding something hidden. They are about protecting it, sharing it responsibly, and helping others see its value. And in doing so, even the most stubborn rancher could create something beautiful, lasting, and meaningful. The hidden canyon, once a source of curiosity and conflict, was now a living testament to patience, care, and the courage to act wisely. Henry smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of a lifelong journey of discovery, responsibility, and respect for the land he called home.